Hi guys, welcome back to Tangbe's Learning Content. My name is Jonathan Tangbe. I am going to show you guys how to configure a router as a DHCP server using Packet Tracer. And before we do that, I'm just going to show you guys roughly how the network configuration will be going. So let's just go right into our IP address scheme. And so here we have 1.0 network here, which is a sales switch. And we have our research switch here, which is 2.0 here. So, and then we have gigabyte Ethernet 0/1 over here, gigabyte Ethernet 0/2 here. And then, of course, if you come to the sales switch, we have gigabyte 0/1 and then gigabyte 0/0 on our router. So before ever we do that, we're going to have to try to configure our gigabyte interfaces that are going to the two switches. And what I'm going to do, I'm basically going to configure our network on the left first, which is a sales switch. And then when we're done with that, we're going to go over to our research switch and try and finish the configuration. So thank you so much for coming back to my channel, and I really appreciate you guys. If you really like what you are saying, please make sure you click the like button and then you subscribe so that anytime I upload a new video, you will be the first one to get the info. So without wasting much time, let's go into our DHCP server and configure our gigabyte internet 0/0. All right, let's go. So over here we double click on DHCP. So as you can see, we are already so let's exit to that first, and so that I'll show you guys. So we'll do config t, and then of course we configuring the gigabyte internet 0/0. So we do interface gigabyte 0/0 on our router 0/0, and then of course the IP address we have there. We have a network there with 1.0. So this is going to be our first interface on a network. So it's going to be 192.168 or 1.1, which is our first interface on the network. So we'll do IP at 192.168.1.1. And of course, this is IPv4 subnet, and it's a class C. So basically, we're going to do 255.255.255.0, and then we hit enter. So, and then of course, before ever we go, we have to make sure input the interface up. We see no short. So right now, as you can see, everything changed, from down to state to up. So that means that interface is basically up and running now. So let's just go there and see like how the interface color already changed from red to green. So that means everything is working okay on that interface. And so now that we put the interface up, so our job here now is for us to go and configure the DHCP server so that those clients on this switch can be able to obtain IP addresses that will be configured as a DHCP, so that they will obtain them automatically without us going into those hosts over here and enter them manually. So everything will be given automatically. So let's go back to our gigabyte. And so now we have to exit from that interface since we are done. So what we're going to do, we're going to activate DHCP or excluded address. That way we know the iOS we know we actually ready to configure DHCP. Before we do IPDHCP excluded address, so we do 192.168.1.1 and then 192.168.1.10, and then we hit enter. And the reason we do that is because we are telling DHCP that okay, so IP address is starting from 1.1 all the way to 1.10. We don't want you to give out those IP addresses to any host in the network. You have to reserve those. Basically, reserve them for the administrators, reserve them for the network engineers. They know what they want to do with those IP addresses because they have some configuration they might need to enter IP addresses or statically. So there is no need for you to actually configure a DHCP server to give out all the IP address. You have to reserve some. So basically, we have reserved about 10 IP addresses from here. So we already tell them so. Uh, it's going to exclude those IP addresses. The DHCP configuration will not issue out those 10 IP addresses we have reserved. So now our next configuration will be we have to create a pool of IP addresses. So you do IP DHCP pool. So where we are configuring the switch, we're configuring is basically a sales switch. So what is will be easy for you is based on the network you are configuring, you just give it to that name. So the network we are configuring, let's just go back to our diagram and see. So this is a sales switch, and then we are configuring the gigabyte internet zero slide zero that goes to the sales switch. So our our DHCP pool name will be sales. So I like to give it apps sales IPDC pool sales. That's going to be our name, and then our network. We have to get our network. We do network 192.168.1.0 and then 255.255.255.0, and then we enter again. And of course, we have to make sure we give a default router for this DHCP pool. So we do default router 192.168.1.1 is our first interface we configure to the router. It's going to be our default router. Of course, that is going to be our default gateway. So there is no way you can pass through the network without passing through that interface. So that's why it's a default router. That default router will be doing all the job of the DHCP server. So we hit enter. And then again, the next thing we are going to configure will be a DNS server. If we want, we can configure the DNS server from this point, or we just stop right from here and test our DHCP, which eventually will still work. But for this configuration still, I want you guys to see how you should be able to configure like the full DHCP server, including DNS. So you do DNS server, and then of course, let's just take whatever DNS server we want to use according to our network configuration. So for this configuration, I would just take 8.8.8.8 and then I'll hit enter. So now we're done with the DHCP configuration. This is where we stop. We provide our DNS server, of course. We already given our default router information, then our network information, then our pool name, and then of course the excluded IP addresses we don't want the DHCP to be given out. So uh, it looks like everything is done from this point. So let's just end from here, and then let's minimize this and go to our, let's go to PC2 and PC3 and try to see the configuration we have done is really working for us before we go to the research switch. So we're going to start with PC2. Let's double click on PC2 and then go to desktop, and then you do the IP configuration. You double click here. Basically, as you can see, we don't have any IP address configured on this host right now. So our job is to make sure this host have valid IP address on the network so that other clients on the network can be able to reach this. And that's why we configure the DHCP server to do that for us. So we click here DHCP and then wait, we are requesting. So as you can see, of course, when we do the excluded address, we start from 1 all the way to 10. And so whatever DHCP is given to us, now we are testing. This is our first host on the network. So it starts with 11, meaning from 1 to 10 is not giving that out. So we start to 11 and then we we push our way up. So DHCP know exactly where this IP address is going to stop. So we don't have to worry about that either. So we already have a valid one, and then we have our default gateway, and then we have our DNS server. So that's really good for us. So let's go back to our PC3 and check what is going on there. So as you can see, let's go to our desktop and let's double click. So as you can see, it's the same, just like PC2. There is no information, no IP address so far. So that's why we configure the DHCP, so that we can get IP address automatically through this PC. So let's click again DHCP and then we requesting. As you can see, it's our second one on the network. So we basically have another .12 on the network, which is our second one. And of course, our excluded address or command is actually working for us. Those excluded addresses are not going to be given to any client on the network. DHCP is reserving that for us anytime we want to use them. All right, so far so good. It looks like everything is working on our sales network. And so what we're going to do next is to go to research switch and configure our DHCP server too. Before we do that, remember we still have to configure our Gigabyte Ethernet first, which is going to be our default gateway for this network over here, which is .2. So let's go back into our DHCP server, and then we do configure terminal. And let's go back and turn our Gigabyte Ethernet is Ethernet 0/1. So we go back there. So interface Gigabyte 0/1. And then we give it the IP address, IPR. Remember, it's our second network, 192.168.2.1, and then subnet mask 255.255.255.0. And then of course, we're going to try to bring that interface up so we do no shutdown. So basically give it short, no shut. And so as you can see, that interface have come out according to the command we have just issued, and the interface is now in the up state, which means it's operating normal. So if you go back and check, the color from red, it's now green, which is really telling us that everything seems to be working all right. So of course, our goal is to configure the DHCP server, but you can't do that without having dead interfaces. You have to make sure to put the interfaces up before you configure the DHCP server. So let's go back and do our DHCP configuration. So of course, we know we have our interface running. So now let's exit from this interface. And then let's go back now right away in configuring our DHCP server. So you guys already know, if you remember in our first configuration we did for the sales network. So it's just the same pattern. The only difference here is we are using a different network. So we are doing 2.0 network. So now let's go to our IP DHCP excluded address. Of course, we give 192.168.2.1 and then 192.168.2.10, and then we hit enter. Of course, we are already given, just like the first network, of course, we have given the DHCP instruction that IP address is starting from 2.1 all the way to 2.10. We don't want you to issue those IP addresses for these networks. Keep them for our own use. So that is basically what that command means. And now what we have to do is to create a pool, of course, IP DHCP pool. Of course, you guys should know the pool name already I will use, like the way I start, the first network over there was the sales network. So I like to give it according to the network we are doing. So IP DHCP pool will be research. Of course, research switch. Or we just do research. And then we hit enter. So our next one we are going to do will basically be, now we have done our pool name. So we have to give it a network. So we do network 192.168.2.0, and then subname at 255.255.255.0, and then we hit enter again. So now the next step is for us to do a default router. So we configure default router 192.168.2.1, and then we hit enter. And then our next step we have to do here, of course, you guys should be following by now, and we're going to do our DNS. So we'll do DNS. That's 192.1. Oh, so sorry about that. So our DNS we configure over there was 8.8.8. So we are going to follow the same protocol to make sure we configure that the same DNS on this network too. The DNS shouldn't be different. So we'll do 8.8.8.8, and then we hit enter. So now that it looks like so far this is going to be our end, so our job now is to make sure and go back to the host on the network and see whatever DHCP configuration we have done there to make sure they are fully functional and to make sure they have the IP addresses we are looking for them to obtain. So let's end here, and then let's go back to our PCs on the research suite. So we have 2.0 here. So let's start with PC number 4. We double click here, and then we go to desktop, and then we double click on IP configuration. So now, of course, as you can see, DHCP, immediately we click DHCP, we have 2.11. So it's just kind of like the same procedure like where we start. It's just the difference in network. So basically what we have configured, it looks like it's working all right. And then let's come back to PC number 5 and come to desktop and the IP configuration. Of course, nothing have been configured here. We have to tell the DHCP, hey, we need these IP addresses, and we click here and then we request. Of course, as usual, we already obtained IP address of 2.12 on this host. So basically everything seems to be working for us. So far so good. So in our starting, of course, nothing was configured on our network. So now that we have finished configuring our DHCP, we have to really go ahead and check if these IP addresses on the network can be able to reach themselves in those two networks. So that should be our concern. It's not just about having IP addresses on the network, but let's just see if this network can be able to communicate to each other. So what I'm going to do here is I can use PC number 5 or maybe the PC number 4. So let's just go with PC number 5 and come to the command prompt, and let's ping our interface here gigabyte 0/0 here, which is a default gateway going to the sales switch. Let's see if we can be able to request something from that network and then we get it. So we are expecting to get a valid reply, or else what we have done is not yet completed. So let's go and ping 192.168.1, which is that interface over there, the default gateway, and then we hit enter. So immediately we hit enter, as you can see, we get a valid reply, which means that those two networks, they are in full communication with each other. And so we are really happy for that. I mean, that happens, and we did a very good job and did the configuration. So we go back to this PC over here, or PC number 2, any one of them, and let's double click on them, and let's come to the command prompt, and let's try to ping another default gateway to the research network. Let's just think, if not just the research network to reach us, let's try to reach them too. So let's ping 192.168.2.1, and then we hit enter. So immediately we hit enter, that means everybody on this network right now can be able to communicate with each other, which means our DHCP is running, our communication between each other is working. So far so good. We have done all the configurations. So this is basically how you configure a DHCP server to make sure to get IP addresses automatically on the network. And I'm so happy you guys were able to come and actually stay with me to show you guys how to install this. I really appreciate everyone that came to my channel today, and I am so pleased to see you guys. I am so pleased to be doing this for you guys to make sure you guys have, the much information needed from this channel. So if you want to see more of this information coming your way every, single times every week or maybe a few days, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and make sure you support me. This is a brand new channel. I'm just doing it to make sure those that are coming up learning to be network engineers and network security engineers, this is really important. It's just a basic something, but this is so useful in the real world. So don't take it lightly. If you know this, you can go a long way in your career or in your career field. So thank you so much for coming around today. Thank you. Please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Please go ahead and like. Please go ahead and comment if you have any suggestion of what I should do to improve this channel better. I will really appreciate that. That will not be a criticism. It's basically for me to improve and make the channel better. Thank you so much. Thank you for staying around. Thank you for coming to this channel. Thank you. Take care.